What's up? What's up? What's up? This is Paul. I'm Deb. And this is Finding Freedom by Jarvis Jay Masters. The synopsis will be below, and the link to his website with more of his books, or the rest of his books, and more information about him is going to be listed below as well. Admittedly, I don't know a lot about Jarvis. This is my first time getting into one of his books. I do know that he has been on death row since 1990. That's longer than I've been born, than I've been alive. This man has not seen freedom. And so he writes freedom into his own life. And the power of a story like this, I think, needs to be told and shared. And so that's kind of why I wanted to talk about it. And so I'm going to go ahead and read the front and the back so that we kind of all get an experience of this beautiful, beautiful book. It's really beautiful. So yeah, I'm really excited to get into this. I think if I cry, please forgive me. Oh, I'm a sensitive person. I cry pretty easily, so I will try to cut out anything that gets too crazy. But yeah, no, I don't know. I'm excited. So, let go. Okay. Yes. Take a swig. Make it last. Okay. Finding Freedom: How Death Row Broke and Opened My Heart by Jarvis Jay Masters. This is one of my favorite books, which I have often referred to in my teachings. I am delighted that it will have a wider publication now so that more people can read these wonderful, heartfelt stories. From the foreword by Pema Chodron. And I'm just going to kind of get into the bottom part here. There are many forms of liberation, some that exist at the mercy of circumstance and others that can never be taken away. In this collection of stories, essays, poems, and letters from death row inmate Jarvis Jay Masters, he explores the meaning of true freedom on his road to inner peace through Buddhist practice. He reveals the life of a young man surrounded by violence, his entanglement in the criminal justice system, and following an encounter with the Tibetan Buddhist teachings of Chagdud Tulku Rinpoche, I hope I said that right, an unfolding commitment to nonviolence and peacemaking. At turns joyful, heartbreaking, frightening, and soaring with profound insight, Master's story offers a vision of hope and the possibility of freedom in even the darkest of times. And then they have a little bit about Jarvis here. Jarvis Jay Masters entered San Quentin State Prison in 1981 and has been on death row since 1990, where he spent over 21 years in solitary confinement. The author of That Bird Has My Wings, the autobiography of an innocent man on death row, as well as numerous articles, he won a PEN Award in 1992 for his poem Recipe for Prison Pruno. For more information on the growing campaign to exonerate him, go to www.freejarvis.org. That's www.freejarvis.org. Foreword by Pema Chodron. My dear friend, Jarvis Jay Masters, has been one of my greatest teachers. This courageous man had a very painful early life. At the age of 5, he entered the foster care system, having first experienced hunger, neglect, and violence. He witnessed suffering and trauma at such an impressionable age, and, like too many who don't get the care and supportive environments they need in their young adulthood, he committed armed robbery and in his late teens ended up in San Quentin prison. While still serving his sentence in San Quentin, Jarvis was accused of conspiring to murder a prison guard. To this day, he maintains his innocence of that crime, and I've joined in the Free Jarvis campaign because I believe him. In the many years I've known Jarvis and visited him at San Quentin prison, I can see that he's undergone a profound personal transformation, one that has been a result of his own willingness to examine his heart and mind. On death row, where there is so much despair, anger, and hopelessness, Jarvis has emerged as a gentleman, one who has broken through the pain to find the tender humanity in his environment. In the Buddhist teachings, we call this compassion. When you practice developing compassion as Jarvis has, you begin to see the world and your place in it from a much wider viewpoint. You learn to touch in and experience the truth that we are all fragile, vulnerable, and longing to be loved. Under the guidance of his first Buddhist teacher, Chagdud Tulku Rinpoche, Jarvis took the Bodhisattva vow, which essentially means devoting your life to compassion. In taking the vow, Jarvis committed to not hurt or harm any beings, and to do what he could to end suffering wherever he could. In his writings, his meditation practice, and his very presence, Jarvis sets the example for others every day. He gets letters all the time, especially from young people who are struggling as he did, who have heard his story and therefore turned their lives around. I am continuously inspired by Jarvis because of his steadfastness and resilience. I know it's not easy for him to sit with intense visible suffering on a daily basis, knowing the situation might never change. And yet, Jarvis has found within himself the ability to be present to his experience, to accept, to open, to receive the lessons of his situation, and to keep his sense of humor. I often think to myself, if Jarvis can break through and find the light in the darkest of places, there's hope for us all. This is one of my favorite books, which I have often referred to in my teachings. I am delighted that it will have a wider publication now so that more people can read these wonderful, heartfelt stories. Oh. Preface. This book contains true stories of my experiences in San Quentin. Many of the names were changed to protect those still in prison, but the characters are all people I've known. That I write of their human side, not just their violence, hardened, humorless side, was a challenge for them, but they all welcomed it, and I've appreciated their willingness to embrace and support my writing. The italicized portions of the book were compiled from my letters to friends over my years in San Quentin, as well as from notes they sometimes took during visits. I want to thank them for their permission to use this material. I've kept parts of letters written to friends to help me discover, understand, sit with so many changes going on in me. I hope they will help the reader understand the transitions I have undergone. Acknowledgements. My correspondents have been my companions, quiet listeners through whom I could hear myself speak, see the better part of myself reflected, and learn more about myself and the world around me. Their correspondence has also helped me through troubled times. I want to thank them all, but especially Jim Cronin, Sarah J. Freeman, Donna Gans, Pam Grier, I don't know how to say that, I'm sorry. I don't know how to say that. Jane Hamilton, Kelly Hayden, Lisa Leghorn, Sarah Paris, Karen Poverny, Will Schonbrunn, Diane Solomon, and Lynn Weinberger. This book was born out of a process of discovery that I shared with Melody Ermachild Chavis, without whose belief in me, support, and encouragement for my case, my life, and my writing, I wouldn't be who I am today. She guided me through the many steps from extreme anger to the clarity of my Buddhist practice. She created a bridge for me to the outside world, bringing people into my life and giving passage to my voice. There are many that I want to thank for their true and stable friendship and for their humor. They have loved me through my anger and have always held me as a part of their family, especially my loving sister, Carlette, Betsy Dubovsky, Melody Ermachild Chavis, Donna Gans, Kelly Hayden, Ellershe Johnson, and Connie Lindley. I am especially indebted to Lisa Leghorn, who helped worked with me diligently in creating this book. She helped me see its benefit and encouraged me not only by her belief in me, but by her pushy, stubborn, loving, and determined insistence, telling me to write, write, write. She is a person whose love has extended the radiant image of Tara to my heart. In my life, they are equal. In particular, I want to thank Susan Moon from Turning Wheel for publishing my first stories, Linda Bear, Michael Bradfute, Mary Racine, and Anna Smith at Padma Publishing for their help with editing and production, Robert Racine of Padma Publishing, and Kim McLaughlin of Chagdud Gompa for their support of this project, Anna Smith and all the other typists and transcriptionists without whom this book could not have been produced from inside the walls of San Quentin, and Sarah Jane Freeman for her love, care, determination, and conviction as my agent in guiding me through the publication of this book. Finally, without my precious teacher, Chagdud Tulku Rinpoche, I would not have my belief in the Buddhist path or know the true purpose of these words, benefiting others. Introduction by Melody Irmachild Chavez. As one of the defense investigators who prepared Jarvis's trial, I looked into the details of his life and learned how far he has traveled spiritually in one short lifetime. Jarvis was born in 1962, the same year my oldest child was born. I met Jarvis's mother, Cynthia, while working on this case, but she died of heart failure just before his trial. She had not seen him for many years. All of Cynthia's children were raised in foster care because she was addicted to drugs. Jarvis's father had left the family, and later he too became an addict. In a series of foster care placements, Jarvis was separated from his siblings. For several years, he stayed in his favorite home with an elderly couple he loved, but when they became too old to care for him, he was moved again, at the age of 9. After that, Jarvis ran away from several foster homes and went back to the elderly people's house. He was then sent to the county's large locked facility for dependent children, and later to some more group homes. Once, he stayed with an aunt for a while, but he got in trouble. At 12, he became a ward of the court because of delinquency and was in and out of institutions after that. During my investigation, I met people who had known Jarvis in foster care and institutions, and they told me he had always had a lot of potential. They remembered a smart and articulate youngster with a sense of humor, but too many times he was pushed and he went in the wrong direction. At age 17, when he was a very angry young man, he was released from the California Youth Authority and went on a crime spree, holding up stores and restaurants until he was captured and sent to San Quentin. He never shot anyone, but the big stack of reports that I read about his crimes were scary. As I told him, I'm glad it wasn't in Taco Bell when he came through. Okay, girl. I mean, it's true. It's just reality. As I told him, I'm glad I wasn't in Taco Bell when he came through. When Jarvis arrived in San Quentin in 1981, he was 19. Right away, he got involved in what the prison system calls a gang. Most young men come into prison, black, brown, and white, grouped together for a sense of belonging, for family. In those days, older African American prisoners passed on political education to younger ones. In 1985, an officer named Sergeant Birchfield was murdered in San Quentin, stabbed to death at night on the second tier of a cell block. At the time, Jarvis was locked in his cell on the 4th tier. Although many inmates were suspected of conspiring to murder Sergeant Birchfield, only 3 were tried, Jarvis among them. One was accused of being the spearman, of actually stabbing the sergeant. Another, an older man, was accused of ordering the killing. Jarvis was accused of sharpening a piece of metal which was allegedly passed along and later used to make the spear in which the sergeant was stabbed. In one of the longest trials in California history, all 3 were convicted of their part in the conspiracy to kill Sergeant Birchfield, but their sentences varied. One jury gave the young spearman the death penalty, but the trial judge changed his sentence to life without parole because of his youth. Another jury could not reach a verdict on the older man's sentence, and so he was also given life without parole. Jarvis was sentenced to the same jury to death in a gas chamber, partly because of his violent background. Although his lawyers asked for the trial judge for leniency, also on the basis of his youth, he was 23 when the crime occurred, just 2 years older than the accused spearman. She denied this appeal and sent him to death row. He has been there since 1990. There he must be patient, waiting for appeals to be filed, waiting for the outcomes. Jarvis's situation is unique in one way. He is the only man on death row living in his crime scene. It's as if he'd been convicted of killing a store clerk in a robbery, and his cell had been set up in the same store, so that for the rest of his life his every move was watched, and he was even fed by people who identified with his victim, people who thought every day about the dead clerk's wife and children. And someday, several of the workers at the store might participate in executing Jarvis. Jarvis had more opportunity than most people on this earth to face up to how people feel about him. Jarvis is usually stoic about his situation. He talks about karma and the path he himself took, the choices he made. He often makes me tell the at-risk youths I volunteer with, you guys still have choices. The hardest thing is that he has so few. He doesn't live on ordinary death row. Because the crime he is convicted of involved a guard, he lives in San Quentin's security housing unit called the Adjustment Center. Men on the more relaxed part of death row can make phone calls, listen to tapes, use typewriters. Those in the security housing can only have a few books and a TV. They stay in their cells for all but a few hours of yard time 3 times each week. Jarvis cannot choose what or when to eat, when to exercise or shower. He can't turn the tier lights off or on, regulate the temperature in his cell, or have any control over when he receives visits or how long they last. I think it must be almost impossible to grow into a mature, responsible man when one is infantilized this way, and yet I have seen Jarvis grow. Jarvis is very different today from the troubled, defensive young man I met in 1986. He even looks different. When I met him, his face had a sullen, callous expression, but as happens so often to patients with fatal or life-threatening illnesses, facing his death has opened him up. Having arrived at San Quentin with minimal reading and writing skills, he began to educate himself and to meditate. As I write, he is a mature 35-year-old man, and he plays a constructive role on death row, helping younger men. Not all of the officers hold a grudge against Jarvis. Quite a few have told me they respect the changes he has made in himself. I can tell from the relaxed bodies of the officers who know him that they do not fear him. In contrast to how they handle some other clients of mine, many greet Jarvis, smile at him, touch his shoulder. When I arrive for a visit, typically several officers I run into on my way in tell me to say hi to him. Sergeant Birchfield was killed in June, and if Jarvis is going to have trouble with staff in this prison, it sometimes comes in the month of June. A few times during the month, Jarvis has been placed in the worst part of the prison, on the bottom tier of the security housing. The authorities who make the decision explain it as a convenience. This move is usually stressful at first because Jarvis's belongings, including his personal books and legal papers, are all taken from him, although they are later returned. On the bottom tier of that security housing is a row of cells where the most problematic prisoners are kept. There, Jarvis's neighbors yell all day and all night, and some have hallucinations in which insects are crawling on their bodies or other people are in their cells. Some do not clean themselves or refuse to eat for fear of being poisoned. If inmates in this condition don't improve, they are eventually sent to hospital prisons and officially designated mentally ill. But in the meantime, they can be segregated as they are in the security housing. During those hard months Jarvis spends on the bottom tier, it is particularly difficult for me to watch him get ready to go back to his cell after our visits, which are among the few pleasant times he has. Ordinarily, Jarvis smiles and says goodbye, holding his hands behind him, close to the portal in the metal door so that the officers can reach through and ratchet cuffs onto his wrists. But when he's living in this tier, when his time is up, he doesn't smile. I don't know what else to do except stand patiently an extra second, holding my papers, waiting for him to go. During those months, I worry more about him than I usually do, afraid he will get sick or depressed. But he keeps up his spirits amazingly well. He says that, in a way, his new neighbors are easy to live with, because no matter what they do, he can't really get mad at them. Currently, Jarvis is living back upstairs in a warmer, drier cell. The men on either side are very quiet, giving him the best meditating and writing conditions he has had at San Quentin. Across from his cell is a window. Jarvis is glad the glass is broken, because although the air is cold sometimes, it's fresh. Best of all, through the window, Jarvis can see some far-off houses. Several children play outside, riding tricycles and throwing balls. Jarvis has given the children names, and he's gotten to know them individually by watching them for hours as they play. At Christmas time, he can see the homes decorated with colored lights, the first he's seen in many years. Jarvis has been in prison so long, he loves to hear about the details of ordinary life. I tease him that he probably went to jail before airplanes were invented. It's true he's never flown in one. So I describe the pungent, crowded atmosphere of a cafe, the students with their laptops, the smell of espresso, the stacks of free weekly papers. Jarvis wants to know all about a hike or a family dinner, how it looked, felt, tasted, all the flavors of life that's missing inside. When I tell such stories, we're not exactly living in the moment. In fact, we're not present in San Quentin at all. He is leaning back, smiling, imagining himself with my family or friends. I am reliving some recent event in my own life, seeing it all again. From Jarvis's perspective, my life is so rich, so complex, the world so beautiful. I usually write with Jarvis, not about him. When we write together at the prison, we take a break from discussing the appeal of his case. I take off my watch and put it where he can see it on the ledge between us, and one of us says, "All right, 10 minutes, okay? Go." The idea of this exercise is to loosen up our writer's muscles without worrying about results. We just write. Sometimes about a particular topic, such as a conversation overheard or rain. Sometimes we write whatever comes, just keeping our pens moving. He on his side of the thick wire mesh, and I on my side, the side with the door to the outside world. We both of us put our heads down and scribble away. We are breathing the same stale prison air. We can both hear the murmurs of other visits through the walls, and occasionally a guard voice calling out. Jarvis has more light. The visitor's side of the visiting booth is dim, and the prisoner's side is brightly lit with a fluorescent tube. I have an ordinary ballpoint pen, but he has only the innards of one. He is not allowed to have the hard plastic case, so he writes with the flimsy plastic tube of ink. We are both equally intent on getting words onto paper. When our writing time is over, Jarvis and I read the results to each other. These brief shared writing exercises encourage both of us to keep on writing, and sometimes together we produce seeds that later grow into Jarvis's stories and my essays. His writing and his meditation practice are what make life worth living for Jarvis. Studying Buddhism these past few years has helped him gain remarkable insight. Neither he nor I have any illusions about the fact that he has harmed others, but he has taken the precepts of dedicating his remaining life to compassion and nonviolence, not an easy path in a violent prison. There are many constraints on what Jarvis can write about, many of which can easily be imagined by any reader, as well as others that might be apparent only to those working or living within the penal system. And because his appeals are pending, Jarvis cannot write about his case. His appeals will go to both the state and federal courts, and he will not be close to execution or freedom for at least 2 more years. Jarvis hopes, as he has written, that those who want to try to make sense of it will see, through my writing, a human being who made mistakes. Maybe my writing will at least help them see me as someone who felt, loved, and cared. someone who wanted to know for himself who he was. Sometimes readers may find themselves eager for more details about Jarvis's life and transformation. It is my hope and fervent prayer that the conditions of Jarvis's life will change so that those stories may be written. So we're going to start in section 1, Sanctuary. And this writing is called Sanctuary. When I first entered the gates of San Quentin in the winter of 1981, I walked across the upper yard holding a box called a fish kit, filled with my prison-issued belongings. I saw the faces of hundreds who had already made the prison their home. I watched them stare at me with piercing eyes, their faces rugged and their beards a different shade, all dressed in prison blue and jeans, worn and tore coats, some leaning against the chain fences, cigarettes hanging from their lips, others with dark glasses covering their eyes. I will never forget when the steel cell door slammed shut behind me. I stood in the darkness trying to fix my eyes and readjust the thoughts that were telling me this was not home. This tiny space could not be where I'd spend more than a decade of my life. My mind kept saying, no, hell no. I thought again of the many prisoners I had seen moments ago standing on the yard, so old and accustomed to their fates. I dropped my fish kit. I spread my arms and found that the palms of both my hands touched the walls with ease. I pushed against them with all my might until I realized how silly it was to think that those thick concrete walls would somehow budge. I groped for the light switch. It was on the back wall, only a few feet above the steel-plated bunk bed. The bed was bolted into the wall like a shelf. It was only 2.5 feet wide by 6 feet long, and only several feet above the gray concrete floor. My eyes had adjusted to the darkness by the time I turned the lights on, but until now I hadn't seen the swarms of cockroaches clustered about, especially around the combined toilet and sink on the bunk wall. When the light came on, the roaches scattered, dashing into tiny holes and cracks behind the sink and in the walls, leaving only the very fat and young ones still running scared. I was beyond shocked to see so many of these nasty creatures. And although they didn't come near me, I began to feel roaches climbing all over my body. I even imagined them mounting an attack on me when I was asleep. This was home. For hours, I couldn't bear the thought. The roaches, the filth plastered on the walls, the dirt balls collecting on the floor, and the awful smell of urine left in the toilet for God knows how long sickened me nearly to the point of passing out. To find home in San Quentin, I had to summon an unbelievable will to survive. My first step was to flush the toilet. To my surprise, I found all I needed to clean my cell in the fish kit: a towel, face cloth, and a box of state detergent. There were also a bar of state soap, a toothbrush and comb, a small can of powdered toothpaste, a small plastic cup, and 2 20-year-old National Geographic magazines, one of them from the month and the year of my birth. It seemed that time was now on my side. I started cleaning vigorously. I began with one wall, then went on to the next, scrubbing them from top to bottom as hard as I could to remove the markings and filth. I didn't stop until I had washed them down to the floor. They were spotless. If I had to sleep in here, this was the least I could do. The cell bars, sink and toilet and floor got the same treatment. I was especially worried about the toilet. I had heard that prisoners were compelled to wash their faces in the toilet whenever tear gas was shot into the units, to break up mass disruptions, and the water was turned off. I imagined leaning into this toilet, and I cleaned it to the highest military standard. I spent hours, sometimes on my hands and knees, washing down every inch of my cell, even the ceiling. When I had finished, I was convinced that I could eat a piece of candy that had been dropped onto the floor. The roaches had all drowned or been killed. I blocked off all their hiding places by plugging up the holes and cracks in the walls with wet toilet paper. After the first few days had passed, I decided to decorate my walls with photographs from the National Geographic magazines. The landscapes of Malaysia and other parts of the world had enormous beauty, and I gladly pasted photos of them everywhere. These small representations of life helped me to imagine the world beyond prison walls. Over the years, I collected books and even acquired a television and radio, windows to the outside world, and I pasted many thousands of photographs on the wall. The one that has made my prison home most like a sanctuary to me is a small photograph of a Buddhist saint that a very dear friend sent to me. It has been in the center of my wall for a number of years. I now begin every day with a practice of meditation, seated on the cold morning floor, cushioned only by my neatly folded blanket. Welcoming the morning light, I realize, like seeing through clouds, that home is wherever the heart can be found. Rats. I was a fish, a new convict at San Quentin, sitting alone on my bunk, looking around on that first morning. An older, haunted-looking con, maybe in his late 40s, came up to my cell, puffing on a cigarette butt. "Hey," he said to me, "you seen anybody run by your cell?" "No, I just got here last night." "Oh, is that right? They call me Pops in these parts. Son, how old are you?" I stood up. 19. I be 20 next month, though." "So you're only 19, huh? You sure you haven't seen anybody run by this morning?" "No. What's up?" I asked. "King done ran off without me." "Who's King?" "My pet rat. He's running around here someplace. He broke loose this morning." "Rat? I haven't seen any rats." "Well, King is very noticeable. He comes up to about your ankle, black and real fat. Pretty, too." He smiled, trying to take a puff without burning his lips on the roly butt. "Son, if you see King, he should have a fine string leash around his neck." "Shit, you say he come up to my ankle?" "Yeah, maybe a little bigger. Give me a holler if you see him. Don't try to handle him because he'll get you." "Okay, Pops." I sat back down, then snatched my feet onto my bunk. Okay. Wonder if he ever found King. He gave it a leash. Bless. Okay. Little Black Sparrow. It was my first day out on the prison exercise yard. I had been in San Quentin for only a week and was going through the orientation of a new con, a sort of new walking number. Not knowing anyone, I stood nervously alone that early morning. With my back against the prison fence, I gazed out across the yard at what seemed like to be hundreds of prisoners, some strolling, some conversing, others lifting weights, playing handball, or sitting at the game tables, playing cards and dominoes. The game tables were closest to me. Seated around them were all the older cons, shucking and jiving, slamming cards down on the table in rapid motion. It was exciting to see those older statesmen of San Quentin, with their gray hairs and beards, drinking cold coffee like vinegar wine, cigarettes hanging from their lips. They played in an almost taunting way, challenging each other with intimidation and a kind of wisdom in anticipating their opponent's next play. "Yeah, I got your rabbit ass now," one of them would say, taking a card from his hand, slamming it as hard as he could on the table. "Ah, man, that ain't shit. That jack of diamonds can't cut you paper in a wood factory." The next con would shout. "Ah, man, that ain't shit. That jack of diamonds can't cut you paper in a wood factory," the next con would shout, throwing down a queen of hearts. Now you beat with your badass." Let's start that over. "Ah, man, that ain't shit. That jack of diamonds can't cut you a paper in a wood factory," the next con would shout, throwing down a queen of hearts. Now you beat with your badass. Y'all didn't think old Satchmo had her, huh? Let me tell y'all something. I'm married to her. I'm the one with the big nuts around this table," he would boast, jaw-jocking in harmony with everyone around the table. I drew closer, They reminded me of all the winos I had known as a child from the old neighborhood pool hall near my aunt's house. The only difference was that these men were hanging out in a prison yard. When the card game came to an end, it was midday. By then, Satchmo, who had been making me laugh with his wisecracks, stood up proudly from the table with a cigarette stub hanging from the corner of his mouth. He grinned. "What's up, youngster? Now you see who's king in this neck of the woods when it comes to playing cards. These old dudes, look at 'em. They can't fuck with no youngsters like us." "What do you mean, us?" said Ripsaw. Man, Satchmo, don't you be lying to that young'un. You older than all this penitentiary. You older than all this penitentiary. Penitentiary. "What do you mean, us?" said Ripsaw. "Man, Satchmo, don't you be lying to that young'un. You older than all this penitentiary asphalt out here. Don't you be telling that stuff about we being old. You just as old as us." "He knows it," said Shorty, another old card player. He returned and smiled. "Youngster, that man is not your age. He ain't been your age since the early 60s, so don't you believe him. Come soon he'll be 62. "Man, you must be out your cotton-picking mind," Satchmo burst out as we broke into laughter. "Shit, I'm only 48 and won't be 49 until way, way, way next year." "Man, is that right?" I said. "Wow, I figured you to be more like 32. You don't look much older than that, Satchmo, seriously." "Yeah, that's right," he said with a huge Kool-Aid grin. "They don't know what the hell they talking about. Let's take a walk around the yard. I like your style. You want a cigarette?" "You's all right, youngster. All these old dudes, look at 'em. They bad, so bad on the spirit. Come on, let's go away from these old dinosaurs." We spoke at length as we strolled slowly around the exercise yard. I was only 19. After Satchmo told me he'd been in San Quentin for 16 years, I started to pay more attention. "Youngster, let me tell you something," he said. "I can point out every nook and cranny about this penitentiary. From who's who to what's under the earth, you dig? But since that would take me years, and I don't know you too well, let me just tell you a little story that was passed on to me and others when we first arrived here. It's about a northern sparrow named Young Black who hated to fly south for the winter." It was an old story, but in my present circumstances, it took on new meaning. Young Black hated the thought of leaving his nest home so much that he put off his journey until the last possible moment. After saying goodbye to all his friends flying south, he stayed in his nest 5 months against the laws of nature. Then the weather turned bitter cold and he couldn't delay his flight any longer. So Young Black started to fly south. Soon it began to snow and ice formed on his little wings. Almost dead from cold and exhaustion, he fell to the ground and landed in a barnyard. "We'll just say this is barnyard San Quentin," Satchmo said, looking at me. Now, as the young sparrow was breathing what he thought might be his final breath, a brown horse walked out of the barn and moved his bowels, covering Young Black with hot, steaming fertilizer. At first, Young Black got extremely upset, twitting, "You ass, what in the hell are you doing? This was surely a hot and shitty way to die." But after a while, the hot fertilizer warmed his frozen feathers, and life returned to his body. To his surprise, he discovered he could breathe. Young Black began to chirp so loud that his song could be heard for miles around the yard. Then, slowly, a big white cat named Bobcat came creeping toward the little singing jailbird. O.P. Bobcat dug into the pile of fertilizer and found where the singing was coming from. It took him a while, but in the end, he caught Young Black and ate him. "Damn," I said. "I can't believe the cat just ate Young Black like that. Man, that's a pretty cold-blooded story, isn't it?" "Not if you're righteously thinking about it," Satchmo replied. "You see, young'un, there are some lessons to this. First, not everybody who shits on you is your enemy. Second, not everybody who takes shit off of you is your friend. And finally, young'un," Satchmo paused and stared across the yard, If you ever get warm and comfortable out here, even if it's in a pile of shit, you keep your mouth shut. Damn. Just that last phrase had fucking layers to it. Okay. It's really interesting. I want to keep reading it. But I feel like I'm going to finish this book in like 3 days probably. How long is this one? Okay, I am going to take a pause. Yeah, I'm going to take a pause here. On page 11, because there was quite a bit with the introduction, preface, and forward. Wow. What to say about Jarvis? I thought it was really interesting that the first thing that he did when he got there was cleaned. And I mean, I completely understand that. Like, oh my God, you walk in and it smells like piss? You got your rabbit ass mind. I'm cleaning everything, top to bottom. Even the ceiling. He cleaned the ceiling. Child, we think we are going through something. Nah, actually, you know what? Fuck that. I think just Jarvis, from what I've read already, it seems like he was always a very observant person. And from even like the time, like from when he got here, like, you know, to remember that so vividly. And when he said like, this is home, that fucking hurt, dude. That fucking hurt. Really good writer. And I'm excited to get into the rest of it. My accent's gonna come out probably. Also, he switches a little bit between AAV. It's like AAVE light. It definitely seems to be edited down. And so, you know, I'm probably gonna stumble between that back and forth a little bit. Because I haven't code switched that that quickly in a while. But yeah, no, and also like reading it is a little difficult for me. Excuse me. But yeah, I mean, honestly, this was really fascinating. I'm excited to get into the rest of the book and learn a little bit more about Jarvis and his story and what he went through. I think that his observations have been pretty... We haven't really gotten much, you know, so, yeah. If you're enjoying this, feel free to stay for part 2. Or check out Team Human, if that's more your jam. Whatever you like. You can have whatever you like. Feel free to leave any suggestions in the comments. I only do nonfiction books, and so if you have anything, especially if it has anything that's topical right now, and it has to be available at a public library. That's my only rule. That's my main rule, really, is that I'm trying to like really just support the library more, and yeah. Fun. Okay. Anything else I need to say? I think that's it. I think that's it. Okay. All right. Bye-bye.